Okay, so line graphs. Basically, it's in the name. It's a graph, a graphical image of lines that are changing over a period of time. Oh, that rhymes. Should speak to Mr. Hall and let him know that I'm ready to do my English poetry exam. Alright, so let's look at time. So we spoke about time before being an independent variable. An independent variable is not depending on anything. Time moves forward. It will not stop. It will not slow down unless you're Thanos, who could go back in time and steal all the jewels and take over the world. Not going to happen. So we need to look at what's actually happening in a line graph. Now we have data points. In any graph, you'll have data points. Alright, data that you're handling. Now that data is dependent on time. Anything that expresses you, or it really wants you to express information over a period of time, you understand that you're going to be using a line graph. Now most of the case would be like that. Very rare or seldom you'll be doing a bar graph representing as time, because bar graphs are individual pieces of data represented. Alright, now let's look at this. Okay, so time is ongoing. It waits for no one. It stops for no man. It only goes forward. Alright, so we understand it. But then we also understand that as time moves forward, certain things change. You grow up, you become nicer people, you become more responsible, you become an adult, etc. Things change and things occur over a period of time. So we can see that, and that can be represented in a nice graphical representation. Alright guys, how you doing? Hope you're all well. We're looking at line graphs, and also known as broken line graphs. There's two types of line graphs we're going to look at. They're very similar, but the big difference is the fact that the one is fixed. It's more of a fixed line graph. It will be attached to the y and the x-axis right at the bottom. There you set it 0, and the broken line graph is detached from the axis, so it starts off either axis, and we'll go through it. So let's just look at what we have here on the y-axis. In a line graph, any line graph will have, on the y-axis will have recorded data, so anything that is happening over a period of time, data changes. Examples would be anything like rainfall over a period of time, money changing over a period of time, any sort of things changing. That's what we're going to look at. Now obviously our x-axis is represented by time, and time is the independent variable here because it never changes, so it's only going forward. So it's the only thing that is independent. Everything happens according to time. Your body changes over a period of time. You are currently going under changes as you are going through teenage changes. We won't go into depth into that, but what we will carry on in going into depth with is our line graphs. Alright, so let's start with a broken line graph. So as we said, a broken line graph will start off the axis. It won't start on it. So pretty much your first data point will not be at 0. Your first data point would be some sort of number that will represent anything that has happened over the first period that you've recorded in time. So let's look at then what a line graph looks like. So now a fixed line graph starts at 0 and it moves all the way up. So if you are running a race over a period of time, so you ran for 2 hours, you started at 0 kilometers, or you started at 0 minutes and you ran a certain number of kilometers, and then that would have been affected by the time. So we would have started at 0, and the clock would have started at 0, you would have ended at a certain period of time. Alright, so let's do an example. So we have rainfall. Alright, for 6 months. So let's just say rainfall for 6 months in Cape Town. Let's track it, what it would look like over a graph, because if I told you all these data pieces, you would not understand or just have a visual representation of what the rain looks like or the changes that are happening. You would only be able to understand each point as I represented it. Alright, but I'm going to give it to you in a graphical representation so that you can see and feel the understanding of what is happening over a 6-month period here in our little part of the world. Alright, so we have our 6 months, January, February, March, April, May and June. Now we have certain number of rainfall per month, and rainfall is often measured in millimeters, and we will represent that. Let's just say the maximum we would have worked with is at about 50 to 60 millimeters, so we're just going to put it in intervals of tens and you can see I started at 0 and then went to 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. Alright, the reason I put 0 there because some rainfall is lower than others, and in January you don't really have a lot of rainfall, a lot of precipitation, so you'll see as we start this, we'll go through each point. Alright, so we have January, so we start with our points. Remember on the line graph, you first got to do your points. Alright, so we had less than 0 rain, alright, which is interesting. That's an interesting one, but we can represent it. Alright, and then in February we had even less rain. Alright, we had almost no rain happening. So in the first 2 months of the year, generally you have no rain. Alright, then all of a sudden it starts to jump up. March, we had about 10 millimeters of rain in the month of March. Alright, and then we go to April, we see we're going to have about 20 millimeters of rain. And you can see it changing. Alright, you can see it increasing as the months go by, as we go into winter. Now it's starting to form a little bit of a picture, and it's just like connecting the dots towards the end. May we had 40 millimeters, and then in June it picked up to its highest peak, which we had 45 millimeters. Alright, so now you can sort of see. Now the main thing is to connect the dots, and definitely you should always use a ruler. I did not have one on hand when I was doing this, so I'm just going to use freehand, which as you can see is not fantastic. And we then end off with a graphic representation of what has actually happened and occurred over a 6-month period in terms of rain. So now we can see that obviously January, February no rain, March it picks up gradually, then it starts to really hit us, and by June we're in the thick of winter, and we can see that the amount of millimeters that are falling is higher in the winter months. I mean, that was pretty obvious. Alright, so we're going to look at another example, but we're going to use a fixed line graph, so we're going to start at 0. We're going to look at the business earnings over a period of a month. Alright, so a month is made up of 4 weeks. We'll just use this one, sometimes it's 4.5 and 4 and a bit, but we'll just use a 4-week period or a month, which is otherwise known as a month. So, a company is going to earn a certain number of cash over this period. So we're going to map it out on a graph. It would be very difficult to tell you each of these data points and for you to understand how much growth we've had or the loss we've had, unless you could really do graphical images in your head and contain them in one spot. Very difficult, so this is why we use graphs in this period. Alright, so we're going to start at 100,000 Rand, we work our way up to about 600,000 Rand. Alright, so as you can see I've represented them by K being the 1,000 representation for money, or any sort of understanding and talking about hundreds of thousands. Okay, so enough rambling, let's get into it. So we have the earnings on our y-axis. That is going to change according to the days of the month. Some months you might do, some weeks you might do well rather, and other weeks you might do very bad, depending on certain variables. Now remember, time is independent. Is not affected by anything. We are affected by it. So our money, our cash flow in the business is affected by this time. Alright, so let's look. So in the first week we went from 0 and we earned about 100,000. Alright, so nice. We're earning some good cash here. Alright, so we can move that up there. Alright, notice how I put the dots in line with each other. So look at where's our next earning. In the second week we skyrocketed up to about 300k, so that's an extra 200,000 earned. As you can see, the points will indicate that they're both in line. Y and X axis dots are in line. Third week we went to about 400, we only earned an extra 100k, and then we ended up with about 550,000k. So as you can see, in those middle weeks we didn't earn as much as we had done in the first part and the end part. So that could be good information for us as a business to go and see, okay, what actually happened in the week. Was it just a bad week? Were our consumers just in a bad slump? Was the marketplace in a bad way? This data will help us then earn or look at what we can do better in our business. Alright, so that's why it's important to have this data represented. Okay.